Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams turned off the engine of his black sedan and took a deep breath. The Sunday evening air was warm and peaceful in Virginia Beach. Just 20 minutes ago, he had been laughing with his family at his nephew's birthday party. The little boy had blown out 6 candles on his superhero cake while Marcus helped him open presents. It was one of those perfect family moments that made all his hard work and sacrifice worthwhile. Marcus had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a Marine sniper. He was known among his fellow soldiers as one of the best marksmen the Corps had ever seen. His steady hands and sharp eyes had saved countless American lives overseas. Back home, he was just Uncle Marcus who brought the best birthday gifts and told amazing adventure stories that made the kids gasp with excitement. The flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror broke through his peaceful thoughts. Marcus glanced at his speedometer and frowned. He had been driving exactly 35 miles per hour in the 35-mile-per-hour zone. His military training had taught him to always follow rules and stay alert. He was never careless, especially when driving. Marcus pulled his car to the side of the quiet residential street. He rolled down his window and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. This was standard procedure that every military person learned. Always keep your hands visible. Always stay calm. Always show respect to authority figures. The police officer who approached his car was a white man in his 40s with a thick mustache and cold blue eyes. His name tag read Officer Patterson. He walked with an aggressive stride that immediately put Marcus on edge. Something about the officer's body language suggested this was not going to be a routine traffic stop. "Good evening, officer," Marcus said politely. His voice was calm and respectful, just as he had been trained. "Is there a problem tonight?" "License and registration," now Patterson barked. His tone was harsh and demanding. He did not return Marcus's polite greeting or explain why he had been pulled over. Marcus reached slowly toward his glove compartment to get his registration papers. Every movement was deliberate and careful. He had learned in the military that sudden movements could be misinterpreted in tense situations. Even though this was just a traffic stop on American soil, he found himself using the same caution he had used in combat zones. "You were speeding," Patterson said as he snatched the documents from Marcus's hand. "I clocked you going 40 in a 35 zone." Marcus knew this was not true. His car had a digital speedometer that was very accurate. He had been watching it carefully, as he always did. But he also knew that arguing with police officers rarely ended well, especially for someone who looked like him. "I respectfully disagree, sir," Marcus replied calmly. "I was watching my speed very carefully. I was going exactly 35 miles per hour. Patterson's face reddened with anger. "Don't you dare argue with me, boy," he snapped. The word boy hit Marcus like a slap across the face. He had heard that tone before growing up in the South. It was the same dismissive, contemptuous way some people spoke to black men, regardless of their accomplishments or character. "I am not arguing, officer," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. "I am simply stating what I observed on my speedometer. I am very careful about following traffic laws." "Where are you coming from?" Patterson demanded. His suspicious tone suggested he thought Marcus was lying about something. "Why are you in this neighborhood?" "I was visiting family for my nephew's birthday party," Marcus explained. "He lives just a few blocks from here on Oak Street. It was an innocent family gathering with cake and presents and children playing in the backyard." Patterson looked skeptical, as if attending a child's birthday party was somehow suspicious behavior. He studied Marcus's license with narrowed eyes, taking much longer than necessary to examine the simple document. "What do you do for work?" Patterson asked. "I am active duty military," Marcus replied with quiet pride. "United States Marine Corps. I served my country as a sniper and have completed 2 combat tours in Afghanistan." The officer's expression grew even more hostile, instead of showing the respect that most Americans gave to military service members. Patterson seemed angry that Marcus had mentioned his military service, as if it was some kind of challenge to his authority. Marcus began to realize that this traffic stop was about to become something much more serious than a simple speeding ticket. The officer's aggressive behavior and suspicious questions were warning signs that his military training had taught him to recognize. But he never imagined he would need those survival skills on a quiet Sunday evening in his own country. Officer Patterson stared at Marcus with growing suspicion. The words United States Marine Corps seemed to make him even more angry instead of earning the respect that military service usually commanded. Patterson's jaw tightened as he looked back and forth between Marcus's license and his face. "I don't believe you," Patterson said with a sneer. "You don't look like any Marine I've ever seen. Where's your proof?" Marcus felt his heart rate increase, but kept his voice calm and steady. "Sir, I have my military identification card in my wallet. I can show it to you if you would like to verify my service." The statement was simple and reasonable. Marcus had carried his military ID everywhere for the past 8 years. It was standard procedure for all active duty personnel. The card would clearly show his rank photograph and service details. Any doubt about his military status would be resolved immediately. Patterson's hand moved closer to his service weapon. "Yeah, right," he said. "I bet you've got all kinds of fake IDs in there, probably stolen from some real soldier." The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had risked his life for his country. He had spent months in dangerous combat zones protecting American lives and values. His fellow Marines considered him a hero. His superiors had recommended him for numerous commendations. Now he was being accused of stolen valor by someone who was supposed to protect and serve his community. "Sir, with all due respect," Marcus said carefully, "I am telling you the truth. I am Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, serial number 2,847,563,892. I served with the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marine Regiment. My commanding officer is Colonel Rivera. You can verify this information through official channels." Marcus recited his military details from memory, just as he had done countless times during training and deployment. Every Marine knew their information by heart. It was drilled into them from day one of basic training. He hoped that providing specific details would convince the officer that he was legitimate. Patterson's face grew redder with each word Marcus spoke. Instead of being impressed by the detailed military information, he seemed to take it as some kind of personal insult. His body language became more aggressive and threatening. "Shut up," Patterson shouted. "I don't want to hear your lies. You think you can impress me with some fake military talk. I know what you really are." The officer's words carried an ugly undertone that Marcus recognized immediately. He had heard similar language from racist individuals throughout his life. Despite his military service, his education, and his spotless record, some people would always see him as a threat simply because of the color of his skin. Marcus realized that showing his military ID might actually make the situation worse. If he reached toward his wallet, Patterson might claim he was going for a weapon. The officer was clearly looking for any excuse to escalate the confrontation. Marcus's military training had taught him to recognize when a situation was becoming dangerous. "Officer, I am going to reach slowly into my back pocket to get my military identification," Marcus announced clearly. He moved with deliberate slowness, making sure Patterson could see exactly what he was doing. "My hands are moving slowly and I am reaching for my wallet only." "Don't you move," Patterson screamed as his hand gripped his gun handle. "Keep your hands where I can see them. Don't reach for anything." Marcus immediately froze with his hand halfway to his pocket. His combat experience had taught him to read dangerous situations quickly. Officer Patterson was on the edge of drawing his weapon over what should have been a simple traffic stop. One wrong move could turn this encounter into a tragedy. "Sir, I was only trying to show you my military identification, as you requested," Marcus said with perfect calm. "I will keep my hands visible at all times. I am not a threat to you or anyone else." But Patterson was no longer listening to reason. He grabbed his radio and called for backup units. "All units respond to Oak Street and 5th Avenue," he announced. "I have a suspicious individual who may be impersonating military personnel. Subject is being uncooperative and may be armed." Marcus felt sick to his stomach as he heard the false report. Nothing Patterson said was true. Marcus had been completely cooperative. He was not armed except for his legal concealed carry permit, which he had not mentioned. He was not impersonating anyone. Every detail about his military service was absolutely genuine. Within minutes, Marcus could hear sirens approaching from multiple directions. What had started as a simple traffic stop was turning into a major incident with multiple police units responding. Patterson had painted him as a dangerous criminal over the radio. The other officers would arrive expecting to deal with a serious threat. As the first backup unit pulled up with lights flashing, Marcus closed his eyes and said a silent prayer. He thought about his nephew's birthday party just 30 minutes ago. He thought about his fellow Marines who were counting on him to return safely from this deployment at home. He wondered if he would live to see another day. 3 police cars arrived within 2 minutes of Patterson's radio call. Their flashing lights turned the quiet residential street into a circus of red and blue colors. Marcus watched in disbelief as 6 officers jumped out of their vehicles with hands on their weapons. They surrounded his car as if he were a dangerous criminal instead of a decorated war hero. "Get out of the vehicle now," Patterson shouted. His voice carried across the neighborhood, causing porch lights to turn on and curious faces to appear in windows. Neighbors who had been enjoying a peaceful Sunday evening were now witnessing what looked like a major police operation. Marcus slowly opened his car door and stepped out with his hands clearly visible above his head. His movements were careful and deliberate, just as his military training had taught him. He knew that any sudden motion could be interpreted as threatening by officers who had been told he was dangerous. On the ground, Patterson screamed, pointing his weapon directly at Marcus. "Get down on the ground right now." Marcus felt his heart breaking as he knelt down on the rough asphalt. His dress shirt, which he had worn to his nephew's birthday party, was getting dirty and torn. The same clothes he had worn while playing with children and cutting birthday cake were now being ruined as he was forced to lie face down on the street like a common criminal. "I am complying with all your commands," Marcus said clearly. His voice remained calm and respectful, even though his world was falling apart around him. "I am not resisting in any way. I am a United States Marine, and I am cooperating fully." The backup officers looked confused as they heard Marcus speak. His polite tone and obvious education did not match the dangerous criminal they had been expecting to find. Officer Jenkins, who had 20 years of experience, could see that something was not right about this situation. "What exactly did he do?" Jenkins asked Patterson quietly. "He was speeding and then got aggressive when I tried to question him," Patterson lied smoothly. "Claims to be some kind of military hero, but I think he's got fake identification. Probably stolen valor." Marcus lay motionless on the ground, listening to the false accusations being made against him. Every word Patterson spoke was a complete lie, but the other officers had no way of knowing that. They had to trust their fellow officers' report of what had happened. The handcuffs were tight around Marcus's wrists, cutting off circulation to his hands. These were the same hands that had operated a sniper rifle with deadly precision to protect American soldiers. These were the hands that had saluted the American flag thousands of times. Now they were bound behind his back, as if he were an enemy of the country he had sworn to defend. Mrs. Henderson, who lived across the street, had come out to her front porch to see what was happening. She was an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years. She had watched the entire encounter from her living room window and was shocked by what she had witnessed. That young man was not doing anything wrong. She called out to the officers. He was being very polite and respectful the whole time. "I saw everything that happened." "Ma'am, you need to go back inside," Patterson told her harshly. "This is police business, and you don't know what you're talking about." But Mrs. Henderson was not easily intimidated. She had raised 5 children and buried a husband who served in Vietnam. She knew right from wrong, and what she had witnessed was completely wrong. "I know what I saw," she insisted. "That boy was not causing any trouble. He was just trying to show you his identification when you started yelling at him." More neighbors had gathered on their porches and sidewalks. Word was spreading quickly through the small community that something terrible was happening. Many of them had cell phones and were recording the scene. The images of a well-dressed black man in handcuffs, surrounded by multiple police officers, would soon be shared across social media. As Marcus was lifted to his feet and walked toward the patrol car, he caught sight of his reflection in a store window. His shirt was torn, his pants were dirty, and his dignity was completely shattered. This was not how he had imagined his evening would end when he left his nephew's birthday party. The charges kept getting more serious as Patterson filled out his report: resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, assaulting a police officer, and impersonating military personnel. Each false accusation was like another nail in the coffin of Marcus's reputation and career. As the patrol car pulled away from the scene, Marcus looked back at the neighbors who had witnessed his humiliation. Some were shaking their heads in disgust, while others were already on their phones calling local news stations. Mrs. Henderson stood on her porch with tears in her eyes, knowing that a great injustice had just taken place in her quiet neighborhood. Marcus had faced enemy fire in Afghanistan without flinching, but sitting in the back of that police car, he felt more afraid than he had ever felt in combat. At least in war, he knew who his enemies were and why they wanted to hurt him. Here in his own country, he was being destroyed by people who were supposed to be on his side. Colonel Rivera was in his office early Monday morning reviewing training schedules when his phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to Lieutenant Barnes from the base legal office. The news he delivered made the colonel's blood run cold. "Sir, we have a problem," Barnes said carefully. "Staff Sergeant Williams was arrested last night during a traffic stop. He's being held on multiple charges, including assaulting a police officer." Colonel Rivera dropped his coffee cup on his desk. The hot liquid spilled across important documents, but he did not even notice. Marcus Williams was one of his best Marines. The young man had an absolutely spotless record and was respected by every person in the unit. "That's impossible," Rivera said firmly. "There has to be some mistake. Williams would never assault anyone unless his life was in immediate danger. What exactly happened?" According to the police report, he was stopped for speeding, then became aggressive and violent when questioned. They claim he was impersonating military personnel and resisting arrest. The colonel felt anger rising in his chest. He had known Marcus Williams for 3 years. The young Marine was quiet, respectful, and completely professional in every situation. Rivera had personally recommended him for promotion twice and had never seen him lose his temper or show disrespect to anyone. "Get me everything," Barnes, Rivera ordered. "Police reports, witness statements, body camera footage, anything and everything related to this arrest. And get Williams a lawyer immediately." Colonel Rivera had served in the Marines for 22 years. He had seen good soldiers falsely accused before, especially young black Marines who found themselves targeted by racist individuals in civilian communities. The military was not perfect, but it was far more fair and equal than the outside world. Within 2 hours, Rivera had assembled a complete picture of what had really happened during the traffic stop. The body camera footage from Officer Patterson's uniform told a very different story than the written police report. Marcus had been polite and cooperative throughout the entire encounter. There was no evidence of speeding, resisting arrest, or any aggressive behavior. The colonel watched the footage 3 times and grew more angry with each viewing. He could see Marcus trying to show his military identification, while the officer screamed at him and called for backup. He could hear Marcus repeatedly stating that he was cooperating and not resisting. The arrest was completely unjustified. Rivera immediately called General Hayes' office at Marine Corps headquarters in Washington. The general was a 4-star officer who had worked her way up through the ranks over 30 years of distinguished service. She was known throughout the Corps as someone who would fight for her Marines against any injustice. "General, this is Colonel Rivera, calling about one of my Marines," Rivera said when Hayes answered the phone. "We have a serious situation that requires your immediate attention." He explained the entire incident to the general, including the false police report and the body camera evidence that contradicted every accusation. General Hayes listened in silence as Rivera described how a decorated combat veteran had been humiliated and arrested for no legitimate reason. "Send me everything," Rivera, General Hayes said when he finished. "Body camera footage, witness statements, service records, everything. I want it on my desk within 2 hours." "Yes, ma'am," Rivera replied. "General, there's something else you should know. This is already starting to get media attention. Neighbors recorded parts of the arrest and posted them on social media. The story is spreading quickly. General Hayes had dealt with media crises before, but this situation was particularly sensitive. A decorated Marine being falsely arrested would generate national headlines and potentially damage the reputation of the entire Corps. More importantly, it was a gross injustice against someone who had risked his life serving his country. "I'm flying down there personally," Hayes told Rivera. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the week. This Marine deserves to have someone fight for him, and that someone is going to be me." Meanwhile, Marcus sat in a holding cell at the Virginia Beach jail trying to process what had happened to his life. He had called his commanding officer from the jail phone and reported his arrest as required by military regulations. Now he was waiting to see if his career and reputation could survive this nightmare. The other inmates in the cell were curious about the quiet, well-spoken man who did not seem to belong in jail. When they learned he was a Marine who had been arrested during a traffic stop, several of them shook their heads in disgust. Even convicted criminals could recognize injustice when they saw it. Marcus thought about his nephew's birthday party, which seemed like it had happened in another lifetime. He wondered if his family had heard about his arrest yet. He wondered if his fellow Marines would believe the false accusations against him. Most of all, he wondered if the truth would ever come out, or if his life would be destroyed by lies. Back at the police station, Officer Patterson was filing his final report and congratulating himself on what he believed was good police work. He had no idea that his body camera had recorded everything, and that some of the most powerful people in the American military were already planning to make him pay for his actions. The wheels of justice moved slowly, but they were beginning to turn in Marcus's favor. By Tuesday morning, the story had exploded across social media. Mrs. Henderson's grandson had posted the video she recorded on his Facebook page with the caption, "Decorated Marine arrested for no reason in Virginia Beach." The post was shared over 50,000 times in the first 12 hours. Local news reporter Sarah Chen received a tip about the story from a viewer who had seen the social media posts. Chen was an experienced journalist who specialized in investigating police misconduct and civil rights violations. When she saw the footage of Marcus being arrested, she knew this was a story that needed national attention. Chen called the Virginia Beach Police Department for comment. The public information officer gave her the standard response that the matter was under investigation and they could not comment on pending cases. But Chen had been a reporter for 15 years and knew how to dig deeper than official statements. She contacted several neighbors who had witnessed the arrest. All of them told the same story, that Marcus had been polite and cooperative, while Officer Patterson had been aggressive and hostile from the very beginning. Mrs. Henderson agreed to an on-camera interview, despite her nervousness about appearing on television. "That young man was a perfect gentleman," the elderly woman told Chen. "He never raised his voice or made any threatening gestures. The police officer was the one acting crazy, not that poor Marine." Chen also reached out to military contacts who confirmed that Marcus Williams was indeed an active duty Marine with an outstanding service record. His commanding officers spoke highly of his character and professionalism. This was not some fake soldier trying to get respect he did not deserve. The story aired on the evening news and was immediately picked up by national networks. The contrast between Marcus's military service and his treatment by police was stark and compelling. Within hours, the hashtag #JusticeForMarcus was trending on Twitter, with thousands of people sharing their outrage. Veterans organizations across the country rallied to Marcus's defense. The Veterans of Foreign Wars issued a statement condemning his arrest and calling for a full investigation. The American Legion started a legal defense fund that raised over $100,000 in its first day. Sergeant Major Rodriguez, who had served with Marcus in Afghanistan, posted a video on YouTube that went viral within hours. He spoke directly to the camera with tears in his eyes as he described Marcus's heroism during their deployment. "Marcus Williams saved my life," Rodriguez said in the emotional video. "We were pinned down by enemy fire for 6 hours, and Marcus took out 4 enemy positions with perfect shots from over 800 yards away. He is one of the bravest men I have ever known, and he deserves better than this. The video was shared by active duty military personnel around the world. Comments poured in from Marine soldiers, sailors, and airmen who were disgusted by how their brother in arms had been treated. Many shared their own stories of discrimination and mistreatment by civilian police. Talk radio hosts picked up the story and spent hours discussing the broader issues of police accountability and respect for military service. Conservative hosts who usually supported law enforcement found themselves criticizing Officer Patterson's actions. Liberal hosts used the story to highlight ongoing problems with police brutality and racial profiling. The Virginia Beach Police Department found itself under intense scrutiny as media attention continued to grow. Reporters discovered that Officer Patterson had been the subject of 14 previous complaints for excessive force and unprofessional conduct. None of those complaints had resulted in serious disciplinary action. Police Chief Williams was no relation to Marcus despite sharing the same last name, held a press conference on Wednesday morning. He announced that Officer Patterson had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal investigation. He also promised that the department would review all body camera footage and witness statements. But the damage to the department's reputation was already done. Protesters gathered outside the police station carrying signs that read "Veterans deserve respect and justice for Marcus." The crowd was diverse, including military families, civil rights activists, and ordinary citizens who were outraged by what they had seen. Marcus remained in jail, unable to post the high bond that had been set by an unsympathetic judge. His military attorney was working around the clock to get the charges dropped, but the legal system moved slowly. Every day Marcus spent behind bars was another day of injustice. The story reached the halls of Congress, where several representatives demanded answers from the Department of Justice. Senator Martins, who was a Marine veteran, herself called for federal civil rights charges to be filed against Officer Patterson. She spoke on the Senate floor about the sacred obligation to support those who had served their country. "When I see a decorated Marine being treated like a criminal for no reason," Senator Martinez said, "it breaks my heart and makes me angry. This is not what America is supposed to be about. We are better than this." The international media also picked up the story. Foreign news outlets used it as an example of America's ongoing struggles with racial injustice and police accountability. The story was particularly embarrassing because it involved someone who had fought to defend American values overseas only to be denied those same values at home. Marcus's family held their own press conference with the help of a civil rights attorney. His mother spoke through tears about the son she had raised to serve his country with honor. His nephew, the same little boy who had celebrated his birthday the night of the arrest, asked why the police had been mean to Uncle Marcus. The public pressure was mounting from all directions. What had started as a simple traffic stop had become a national symbol of injustice that demanded accountability and change. Attorney David Thompson was one of the most respected civil rights lawyers in Virginia. He had spent 20 years fighting police misconduct cases and had never seen evidence as clear-cut as what he found in Marcus Williams' case. The body camera footage showed beyond any doubt that the arrest was completely unjustified. Thompson filed motions to dismiss all charges against Marcus on Thursday morning. He also announced that he would be filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Patterson and the Virginia Beach Police Department. The lawsuit would seek millions of dollars in damages for false arrest assault and violation of Marcus's constitutional rights. "The case should be thrown out immediately," Thompson told reporters outside the courthouse. "The evidence clearly shows that Staff Sergeant Williams committed no crime and was the victim of police brutality and racial profiling. This is exactly the kind of case that federal civil rights laws were designed to address." But District Attorney Jennifer Walsh was not ready to admit that her office had made a mistake. Walsh was up for re-election in 6 months and had built her campaign around being tough on crime. Dropping charges against Marcus would make her look weak to voters who supported aggressive policing. Walsh held her own press conference to defend the charges. She claimed that the body camera footage did not tell the whole story and that Officer Patterson had acted appropriately based on the information he had at the time. Her comments sparked immediate backlash from civil rights groups and military organizations. The legal battle became a public spectacle as both sides fought in the courtroom and in the media. Thompson released additional evidence, including witness statements and expert analysis of the body camera footage. Every piece of evidence supported Marcus's version of events and contradicted the police report. Colonel Rivera testified at a preliminary hearing about Marcus's character and service record. The colonel spoke for 30 minutes about Marcus's professionalism, heroism, and dedication to duty. He presented official commendations and performance reviews that painted a picture of an exemplary Marine. "There is no person in my command who I trust more than Staff Sergeant Williams," Rivera testified. "He has risked his life to protect this country, and he deserves better treatment than what he received from the Virginia Beach Police Department." The judge seemed moved by the colonel's testimony, but still refused to dismiss the charges. Judge Harrison said he wanted to see the case go to trial so a jury could determine the facts. This decision meant Marcus would remain in legal limbo for several more months. Meanwhile, the pressure on the Virginia Beach Police Department continued to mount. The FBI announced that it was opening a federal civil rights investigation into the arrest. This meant that Officer Patterson could face federal charges in addition to the civil lawsuit. Internal affairs investigators found that Patterson had violated department policy in multiple ways during the arrest. He had failed to properly de-escalate the situation, had used excessive force, and had filed a false report. The investigators recommended that he be fired immediately. But Police Chief Williams was reluctant to take such drastic action without giving Patterson due process. The police union was also fighting to protect their member, claiming that he had acted according to his training and department policies. The union hired their own attorney to represent Patterson in the various legal proceedings. The political pressure was enormous as city council members and the mayor faced daily protests and angry phone calls. Business owners in the tourist district worried that the negative publicity would hurt Virginia Beach's reputation as a family-friendly destination. The economic impact of the controversy was starting to be felt throughout the community. Senator Martinez used her position on the Senate Armed Services Committee to call for congressional hearings on the treatment of military personnel by civilian police. She introduced legislation that would create special protections for service members and veterans who were victims of police misconduct. "We send these brave men and women to fight for our freedoms overseas," Martinez said during a Senate speech. "The least we can do is protect their freedoms when they come home. No veteran should ever be treated the way Staff Sergeant Williams was treated." The case was also getting attention from the White House. President Thompson's press secretary was asked about the situation during a daily briefing and expressed support for a thorough investigation. The president himself had not commented directly but was known to be following the case closely. Marcus remained in jail because he could not afford the $250,000 bond that had been set. His military pay was not enough to cover such an enormous amount, and his family did not have the resources to help. The high bond was seen by many as another example of the injustice he was facing. Supporters organized fundraising efforts to help pay for Marcus's legal defense and living expenses. The online fundraising campaign raised over $300,000 from people around the world who were outraged by his treatment. The money allowed Thompson to hire additional attorneys and expert witnesses. The case was becoming a symbol of larger issues in American society. It represented the ongoing struggle for racial justice, the need for police accountability, and the obligation to support military veterans. Marcus had become the face of these important causes, even though he had never asked for such attention. As the legal battle continued, Marcus tried to maintain his sanity and his faith. He spent his days in jail reading letters of support from fellow Marines and ordinary citizens who believed in his innocence. Their words gave him strength to keep fighting for justice, even when the system seemed stacked against him. General Patricia Hayes stood in her Pentagon office looking out at the Potomac River as she read the complete file on Marcus Williams for the third time. The four-star general had commanded troops in Iraq and Afghanistan and had seen the best and worst of human nature during her 30-year military career. But what had happened to Staff Sergeant Williams made her angrier than anything she had experienced in decades of service. General Hayes was not just any military officer. She was the highest-ranking African-American woman in the United States Marine Corps and had broken countless barriers during her rise through the ranks. She understood personally what it meant to face discrimination and prejudice while serving her country with honor and distinction. The general had worked twice as hard as her male colleagues to earn every promotion and assignment. She had proven herself in combat zones, diplomatic missions, and Pentagon conference rooms, where she was often the only woman and the only person of color in the room. Her success had opened doors for other minorities and women in the military. When General Hayes saw the body camera footage of Marcus being arrested, she felt a deep personal connection to his situation. She remembered her own encounters with civilian police who had treated her with suspicion despite her military uniform and obvious rank. The difference was that her 4 stars usually commanded immediate respect and apologies. Marcus Williams represents everything good about the Marine Corps, General Hayes told her aide Colonel Jackson. He is exactly the kind of young leader we need to build our future on. I will not stand by and watch his life be destroyed by racist police officers. The general had been following the case closely through official military channels and media reports. She had read Marcus's service records and spoken with his commanding officers. Every person who knew him described him as professional, dedicated, and completely trustworthy. The idea that such a Marine would assault a police officer was absurd. General Hayes used her considerable influence to make phone calls to people in positions of power. She spoke with senators, congressmen, and Department of Justice officials about the case. Her 4 stars opened doors that would have remained closed to lower-ranking officers or civilian advocates. This is about more than one Marine, Hayes explained to Senator Martinez during a private phone call. This is about whether we as a nation will stand up for the people who risk their lives to defend our freedoms. If we allow this injustice to continue, we send a message that military service means nothing. The general also reached out to her network of retired military officers who now worked in civilian leadership positions. She asked them to use their influence to put pressure on Virginia Beach officials to do the right thing. The response was immediate and overwhelming as dozens of former generals and admirals made their voices heard. But General Hayes knew that phone calls and behind-the-scenes pressure would not be enough. This case required dramatic action that would capture public attention and force people to confront the injustice that had been done. She decided to take a step that was unprecedented in her career. The general cleared her schedule for the following week and made arrangements to travel to Virginia Beach. Her staff was surprised by the decision because 4-star generals rarely involved themselves directly in individual legal cases, but Hayes was determined to send a message that could not be ignored. "I am going to that courtroom, Colonel Jackson," she announced to her shocked aide. "I am going to look that young Marine in the eye and tell him that his country has not forgotten him. And I am going to make sure everyone in that room understands what real leadership looks like." Colonel Jackson tried to talk the general out of her plan. He worried about the political implications of such a high-ranking officer getting involved in a civilian legal case. He also worried about the media circus that would surely follow her appearance. "General, with all due respect," Jackson said carefully, "this could be seen as inappropriate interference in civilian law enforcement. The Pentagon might not approve of such direct involvement." Hayes fixed her aide with the stern look that had intimidated countless officers over the years. "Colonel Jackson," she said firmly, "I have spent 30 years following orders and playing by rules that were designed to keep people like me in our place. Today I am going to do what is right regardless of what the Pentagon thinks about it." The general spent the weekend preparing for her trip to Virginia Beach. She reviewed every detail of the case and planned exactly what she would say in the courtroom. She also prepared for the media attention that would surely follow her appearance. Hayes called her own mentor, General Robinson, who had retired 5 years earlier after becoming the first African-American woman to achieve 4-star rank in any branch of the military. Robinson had faced similar challenges during her career and understood the weight of being a role model for others. Patricia Robinson said during their phone call, "You have always carried yourself with dignity and honor. Whatever you decide to do in this situation, I know it will be the right thing. That young Marine is lucky to have someone like you fighting for him." On Sunday night, General Hayes packed her dress uniform with all of her ribbons and decorations. She had earned every one of them through years of dedicated service and personal sacrifice. Tomorrow, she would wear them not for a ceremony or official function, but to stand up for a fellow Marine who needed her help. The general knew that her appearance in the Virginia Beach courtroom would generate enormous media attention and political controversy. Some people would criticize her for getting involved in a civilian matter. Others would accuse her of playing politics or seeking publicity. But General Hayes had not reached the highest levels of military leadership by avoiding difficult decisions or worrying about criticism. She had learned long ago that true leadership sometimes required taking risks and standing up for what was right even when it was not popular or convenient. As she prepared for bed that night, General Hayes thought about all the young Marines who looked up to her as a role model and inspiration. She thought about Marcus Williams sitting in a jail cell wondering if anyone in authority cared about what had happened to him. Tomorrow she would show him in the world that the Marine Corps takes care of its own. The Virginia Beach courthouse was surrounded by news vans and protesters on the morning of the hearing. Nobody knew that General Hayes was planning to attend, but the media attention was already intense because of rumors that the charges against Marcus might finally be dropped. Reporters had been covering the story for weeks, and everyone sensed that something important was about to happen. Marcus sat at the defense table wearing his dress blue Marine uniform. Attorney Thompson had arranged for him to be released from jail just for the hearing, so he could appear in proper military attire. The uniform was perfectly pressed, and his ribbons were arranged with precision that reflected his military training and pride. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity with supporters who had traveled from across the country to show solidarity with Marcus. Fellow Marines sat in the front rows along with his family members and neighbors who had witnessed his arrest. Mrs. Henderson was there despite her age and difficulty walking because she wanted to see justice done. District Attorney Walsh entered the courtroom looking nervous and uncomfortable. The pressure from federal investigators, media attention, and public outcry had finally forced her to reconsider the charges against Marcus. Her political advisors had warned her that continuing to prosecute an innocent Marine would destroy her re-election chances. Judge Harrison called the court to order and asked both attorneys to approach the bench. The whispered conversation lasted several minutes while the packed courtroom waited in tense silence. Marcus tried to read the expressions on the lawyers' faces, but could not tell what was being discussed. When the attorneys returned to their tables, District Attorney Walsh stood up slowly. Her voice was barely audible as she addressed the court with words that would change everything for Marcus and send shockwaves through the law enforcement community. "Your Honor," Walsh said reluctantly after careful review of all evidence in this case, "the state is dropping all charges against Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams. We have determined that there is insufficient evidence to proceed with prosecution." The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause as Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. His mother began crying tears of joy, while his fellow Marines jumped to their feet in celebration. Attorney Thompson shook Marcus's hand and congratulated him on finally receiving justice. But the celebration was interrupted by a commotion at the back of the courtroom. The double doors opened, and everyone turned to see who was entering. A collective gasp went through the crowd as General Patricia Hayes walked into the room wearing her full-dress uniform, with 4 stars gleaming on her shoulders. The general moved with the confident stride of someone who had commanded thousands of troops in combat zones around the world. Her uniform was immaculate, and her bearing was that of a warrior who had earned every ribbon and decoration through years of dedicated service. She was a living symbol of everything the Marine Corps represented. Marcus could not believe his eyes as he watched the highest-ranking woman Marine in history walk toward him. He had seen General Hayes in official photographs and military ceremonies, but never imagined he would meet her in person. The fact that she had come to his courtroom hearing was beyond his wildest dreams. The general approached Marcus, who immediately stood at attention despite the informal setting. His military training kicked in automatically as he prepared to salute a superior officer. But what happened next surprised everyone in the courtroom, including Marcus himself. General Hayes came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute to Marcus. The gesture sent a powerful message that resonated throughout the packed courtroom. A four-star general was saluting a staff sergeant to show respect for his service and to acknowledge the injustice he had suffered. Staff Sergeant Williams General Hayes said in a clear voice that carried to every corner of the courtroom, "I am here today to personally apologize to you on behalf of the United States Marine Corps and the American people. What happened to you was wrong, and you deserved better treatment from the very beginning." The general continued speaking as news cameras captured every word and gesture. Her speech was not prepared or rehearsed, but came from her heart as she expressed the outrage and disappointment that millions of Americans felt about Marcus's treatment. "You have served your country with honor and distinction," Hayes said, looking directly into Marcus's eyes. "You have risked your life to protect the freedoms that we all enjoy. The fact that you were treated like a criminal instead of the hero you are is a stain on our nation's honor that we must never allow to happen again." The courtroom was completely silent as everyone listened to the unprecedented words from one of America's most senior military officers. Even the judge sat quietly as General Hayes delivered what amounted to an official apology from the highest levels of the American military establishment. Marcus felt tears running down his cheeks as he listened to the general's words. For weeks he had wondered if anyone in authority cared about what had happened to him. Now the most powerful woman in the Marine Corps was standing in front of him, acknowledging his pain and promising that changes would be made. The general's appearance in the courtroom was being broadcast live on national television. Millions of Americans watched as she shook Marcus's hand and spoke quietly with him about his future in the Marine Corps. The image of a four-star general showing such respect to a young enlisted Marine became an iconic moment in military history. When General Hayes finished speaking, she turned to address the packed courtroom. Her words were directed not just at the people present, but at the entire nation that was watching this historic moment unfold on live television. General Hayes turned to face the packed courtroom with the bearing of a leader who had commanded respect on battlefields around the world. Her next words would be remembered and quoted for years to come as she addressed not just the people present, but an entire nation watching on live television. "To everyone in this room and everyone watching at home," General Hayes said in a voice that carried absolute authority, "let me be perfectly clear about what happened here. Staff Sergeant Williams is a hero who served his country with distinction in combat zones, where he risked his life to protect American soldiers and American values." The general paused to let her words sink in before continuing with even more intensity. "When he came home from defending our freedoms overseas, he should have been welcomed as the hero he is. Instead, he was treated like a criminal by people who should have been thanking him for his service. This is not what America is supposed to be about." Hayes looked directly at the news cameras as she delivered her final message. "We must do better as a nation. We must treat our veterans and all our citizens with the dignity and respect they deserve regardless of the color of their skin. The uniform Staff Sergeant Williams wears represents the very best of American values, and anyone who cannot see that needs to examine their own heart." The courthouse erupted in sustained applause as General Hayes concluded her remarks. The image of her saluting Marcus and speaking about justice and equality would be replayed countless times on news programs and social media. It became a defining moment that changed the conversation about police accountability and veterans' rights. Within days of the court hearing, Officer Patterson was fired from the Virginia Beach Police Department. The internal investigation found that he had violated multiple department policies and had a long history of complaints that had been ignored by supervisors. He also faced federal civil rights charges that could result in prison time. The FBI investigation expanded to examine the entire Virginia Beach Police Department. Federal agents discovered a pattern of discrimination and excessive force that had been covered up for years. Several other officers were suspended or fired as the department underwent major reforms under federal oversight. District Attorney Walsh announced she would not seek re-election after facing intense criticism for her handling of the Marcus Williams case. Her decision to initially pursue charges against an innocent Marine had destroyed her political career and damaged her reputation beyond repair. She was replaced by a reform-minded prosecutor who promised to hold police officers accountable for misconduct. Marcus filed a federal civil rights lawsuit that was settled for $3.5 million. The settlement was one of the largest ever paid in a police misconduct case and sent a strong message to law enforcement agencies across the country. The money allowed Marcus to secure his financial